And we welcome you back into the Sporting News Studios. Tom Vandervoort with college basketball writer Ryan Fagan. We are on Bubble Watch, of course, and two very interesting ACC teams to look at today. They play this weekend, Maryland and Virginia. Both these teams have to get a couple wins, or would hope to get a couple wins before we get to the weekend. But let's talk about the Virginia Cavaliers first of all, because this has to be a maddening team for Who fans. They beat Duke at home and do a lot of good stuff at home, but then they just have some bad losses really on the road. I think of Old Dominion. They just lost to Boston College after the big win against Duke. So how do you assess the Cavaliers and their chances of getting in the tournament?
I am genuinely curious to see what the selection committee is going to do with the Cavaliers. They have the most bizarre resume I've seen in a long, long time because they have the good wins. They beat Duke at home. You know, they beat North Carolina at home. They won at Wisconsin early in the year in the ACC Big Ten Challenge. Those are great wins, and they should anchor a good tournament resume. But the Cavaliers have 7 losses to teams with RPIs of 120 or worse. That's not 1, that's not 2, that's 7.
That's a lot.
And a lot of those happened, like the Old Dominion. It happened when John Tell Evans, their outstanding point guard, was injured. They lost to Delaware. He only played a couple minutes. Those are not excusable, but understandable at least. But 4 of those losses to the top 100 are teams with the RPI over 100 have happened in 2013. It's the loss at BC. They've lost 3 other games in the ACC conference. 2 teams that aren't quite that good in terms of being an at-large team. And I don't think that when all is said and done, the good for the Cavaliers is going to outweigh the bad. Unless
they make a run in the ACC tournament.
I think that's what's going to have to happen. I think every time they do something good, they counter it. Well, yeah, exactly. You know, the win against Duke, losing to BC. So I think they're going to have to do something to show the selection committee again that they're worthy of being in there.
So this is a team that goes to the gym and works out and then comes home and has a nice big vanilla shake. Is that what you're telling me?
I think so. You know, I ran a couple miles the other day and had a pizza that night, and I sat there, what am I doing? I think it's kind of the same thing.
Now, what about Maryland? Because I see this team as similar in a way. They do have a good win or two, but then they have some maddening losses as well.
And they're kind of like Virginia, not to that extreme, but they have a couple good wins at home. They beat NC State on a buzzer beater. They knocked off Duke at home, and those are 2 very good teams that are going to be in the tournament. They've struggled on the road, and the biggest issue for Maryland is they had a horrible non-conference schedule. The selection committee loves to reward teams that schedule aggressively, play good teams in the non-conference portion. Maryland didn't do that. Their RPI, the non-conference strength of schedule, is like 300. You know, there are only 340 some odd teams, and that's not a good place to be. That's a big strike against you. Then when you consider what they've done in the ACC, I just think, again, every time they do something good, they counter it with something bad, and I'm just not sure that the balance is going to fall in Maryland's favor.
All right, let's say these 2 teams go in, they win both their games heading into the weekend, which I know is a big assumption at this point. And I look at the UPS Team Performance Index, and Maryland, a little bit below average in the miscellaneous category, which is interesting, and ball handling, whereas Virginia's above average pretty much everywhere. So just looking at strengths and weaknesses of these 2 teams compared to each other, what would you say?
Well, when you look at Virginia, and what makes them good is obviously under Tony Bennett, they play good defense. They control the tempo. And Maryland is not going to be able to dictate what they want to do, the Terps want to do, against Virginia. Virginia's going to control the tempo of that game. They already won the game at Maryland earlier this year. Joe Harris is a fantastic.
I mean, they've got a guy that can score.
He dropped 36 points on Duke. He's a guy, he's played himself into the ACC Player of the Year conversation. You look at Maryland, they're going to have a big game from Alex Len. Alex Len has shown us he's a future NBA lottery pick. He's a guy that can dominate. He played against Mason Plumlee from Duke in the upset. Played fantastic, one of his best games of the year. They have a guy in Des Wells, a transfer from Xavier, who's played very well this year. He can get to the basket. They've got a couple of guys who can get hot from 3-point range, but aren't that consistent. So if Maryland is holding onto the ball, they commit way too many turnovers, the Terps do. And they can get good games from Wells and Len. They have a chance to win this game, but you still have to favor Virginia in this one.
Yeah, and it's in Charlottesville.
That's a big thing, too.
Which is definitely good for UVA. All right, that's Ryan Fagan. I'm Tom Vandervoort. We will see what happens, and we'll see you next time.